Hello, class, and welcome to this week's lecture cast. I'm going to be referring to my lecture notes just to make the lecture brief and the lecture short. You do have a lot of content to review for this week, so let's get started. I know my camera angle is probably a little off. Um, yeah, so I am looking at the camera, but at the same time, it could look totally opposite to you. So I just wanted to make sure that I stated that as well. So let's get started. And I hope you all are doing well. I always like to kind of do my check ins, even though we are uh, physically apart. So, there have been many social movements throughout our history that have drastically changed our society and our course of life throughout the history of the United States uh, and abroad. And there have been a number of very important and very notable social movements. Now, these type of social movements have been revolutionary, which we've discussed. Uh, they've been radical. They've been militant. They've been opportunistic as well in their aims, and many have led to reforms to existing systems from a historical perspective, and we still have a long way to go. But these reforms have led to existing systems in which we function and possibly not function well in. And that's based off of excuse me, that's based off of um, so many things and on so many different levels. So this week we are going to begin the historical civil rights movement, also known as CRM, Civil Rights Movement. Now, the Civil Rights Movement is one of the most notable, one of the most significant social movements in history, and it continues to make history. Now, the civil rights movement was not just about civil rights, but also about social justice, economic justice, poverty injustices, the war in Vietnam, racial discrimination, segregation, Jim Crow. We can also include the women's movement. We can also include the suffrage movement, as well as it relates to women's rights, the right to vote, and so much, much more. Now, the civil rights movement fought to end long-standing political and unjust laws that discriminated and oppressed Black Americans and African Americans. The civil rights movement is also a very important movement, and this movement is very influential when it comes to other social movements, directed and specifically for social change, social evolution, by using methods that we've covered so far, and we have quite a few terms and theories to continue to dissect throughout the semester. So please continue your engagement and your immersement in all of the course modules, the materials, and the information in the modules. Now, as far as direct action, such as demonstrations, such as boycotts, such as protests, marches, rallies, nonviolent, and peaceful, and yet sometimes violence, disobedience tactic and occurrences did evolve. The constant and important themes related to social movements are at the core of conflictual. Remember, conflict, the foundational roots of conflict of why social movements have come to be. It's very, very important. But they also identify and articulate, and there's much bodies of evidence that support all of these theories and these key concepts that we've talked about so far, and that you will continue to review as it relates to the textbook materials as well. And these are clearly identifiable opponents to radical change. As it relates to social movements are also linked by dense, DENSE, and informal relations with clearly, again, identified supporters, individuals, actors, participants, opponents, and they all share a distinct collective identity, a distinct core of collective actions, a distinct core of collective behaviors. Now, the civil rights era included mass action that really mobilized, organized the civil rights movement, and that could not happen without the mobilization of churches, local grassroots organizations, communities, neighbors, neighborhoods, workers, individuals, businesses, institutions, organizations, schools, organized labor, and unorganized until they became organized labor, and people from all walks of life who participated in nonviolent and peaceful protest to call attention to shed light on to the public who would either intervene, advocate, advance, promote, apply public pressure in support of injustice, in support of unjust acts. And it took a long time, and it took many types of civil disobedience from many networks as well as submerged networks in order to really change society. And I want to just underscore it. Networks and submerged networks. Those are key concepts and key theories that were covered briefly in the previous week's slide presentation. So I want to get into, and I know there has been some interest based off of all of your reasons why you wanted to take this class, and your and as well as your introductions, and a few of you really were very interested on the stages of social movements, how they are formed, how they rise, how they flatten out, how they decline. And this week we're going to talk about 4 stages that social movements go through. And in the accompanying slides, you'll see an expansive description on how movements form, how they increase in size, how they dissolve, how they may fizzle out. But there's a lot to that. And based off of these stages of social movements, Dr. Herbert Bloomer, who is the author of these stages, he states that the full expanse of human action isn't just following pre-established rules and patterns. New situations are always constantly arising. And Dr. Bloomer believed that individuals create their own social realities through collective action, through collective identities, through collective behaviors. And he identified and came up with the life cycles, the expansive life cycles of the 4 stages of what social movements go through. Now, Dr. Bloomer developed this concept back in 1969. So let's go to the first of the 4 stages of social movements. And the first stage is emergence. And you'll see this on the slides. And the first stage of a social movement lifestyle is known as the emergent stage. Now, during this stage, social movements are very preliminary. They're new. There's a lot of discussion and talk to really dissect and really see what the problems and the grievances are. And there is very little organization whatsoever in the emergent stage. Now, this stage can be thought of as common grievances, as conflicts, and the potential movement actors or participants may be discontent with some policies or some type of social condition that's really labeled and identified as an injustice. And during the stage, with these policies and these social conditions, there's also a period where participants and actors, they haven't taken on any action in order to resolve these injustices, or if they have taken direct action in order to resolve these injustices, it's most likely that the group or the individual who's taking these actions it started off as an individual and evolved as collective as more people experienced or witnessed or bore witness to these injustices. So now we have collective action at play. Now the next stage, as far as the life cycle of social movement, is stage 2, coalescence. And during this stage in the life cycle, social movements have overcome some barriers that may have never been overcome or resolved. And during this stage, often social unrest or social discontent passes without any organizing or widespread mobilization within the particular social movement. And at this stage number 2, at the coalescent stage, or the popular name called the popular stage, according to Dr. Bloomer, this is distinguished by a more clearly defined sense of, what this dissatisfaction is, what this injustice is. And it is no longer just a general sense of discontent, but it's now a sense of what the discontentment is all about and who's involved or what is involved or who and what is responsible for this discontent and these grievances. Now, discontent is no longer or uncoordinated or individual. It's, it tends to become more of a focalized and formalized collective. So let's move on to the next stage. Stage number 3 is I always have a problem pronouncing this word, so I have to speak slowly in order for you to understand the actual correct pronunciation of bureaucratization. 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 And bureaucratization is formalization. It's really, becoming a formal network now at this stage, and it's described by higher platforms of organization and coalition building strategies. Now, in this stage, social movements have had some success in that the collective actors, the mobilizees, they've raised an understanding to a level that is a coordinated strategy now. These things have been talked through, thought out, specific tactics and strategies have been formalized. And, their strategy is very essential across all social movement or organizations. And SMOs is what we're going to call and identify social movement organizations, SMOs. And SMOs are the short for social movement organization, like I just said. Now, the 4th stage is decline. Now, this is the last stage of the life cycle. And pretty much at this stage of the social movement, the decline or the institutionalization of this stage is pretty much evident. Now, I want to make sure that I emphasize with all of you and that you all understand that decline, the last stage of the life cycle of a social movement, does not necessarily mean failure. It does not necessarily mean failure. Nothing worked. The strategies, didn't take root. They didn't take hold. So I want to make sure that, there's clarity there. So the decline does not mean failure, though there are 4 ways in which social movements can decline. So the first stage of decline is repression, and that means control or destroy a social movement. The next part of this decline is coaptation. Coaptation. Excuse me. We've been doing a lot of talking today. And this means social movement leaders have come to identify and recognize with authorities or movement targets or actors more so, than when the grievances first took root. They're now, there is a constituency there, if I may say. And the next part of the decline, I'm sorry, my screensaver went on to my notes. And while my screen is coming back on, the next stage of that decline is success. Success means that the social movement, has ended. But it could mean that the success of the social movement ends in defeat through repression or cooptation, and some decline because they are successful and they achieved what they set out to do, or they fail. And all of this is in the slides. And failure of social movements are often due to organizational or strategic failings. And it could be a lot of reasons for that. Leadership, no leadership, too much leadership. The strategy, may not have been on point. There could have been things that weren't anticipated in the strategic development of the social movement from others who pretty much don't want to see a social movement make change. And I'm putting it the nice way. And that results from policy, that results from laws, that results from people who've lost interest. That could depend on violence. That could depend on harm. That can depend on safety. It's various reasons. Or they've achieved success. Success was achieved based off of the goals and the intent of why the social movement was mobilized in the first place. Now, here's a quote from Wyatt T. Walker Sr., and I believe I have that in the PowerPoint presentation. I'm quite sure I do. Mr. Walker, he was the chief of staff for the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And his quote is, he stated that we never got the kind of leadership from politicians that the movement required. And that's a powerful quote. And it says pretty much some of the issues that I just spoke previously about at that fourth stage of the life cycle of a social movement, and the decline stage. But there were some wins as well as it relates to the civil rights movement. And this quote is a clear indication as well of the conflict between the social and the political scope and the implications of the social movement and the participants of the social movement. So pretty much this concludes this week's Lecturecast. That's what I name my lectures, Lecturecast, because I'm coming to you with video as well. And I want to end this lecture by stating that based on, again, this 3-credit our course that you all have invested in, and also your interest in social justice activism, I'm here to give you as much information. I can't cover so many social movements in a 15 to 16 week semester. I'm working on some things on trying to have this class be at least 2 levels, introductory level and an advanced level, because there's so much that I want to talk about and discuss, not only in the discussion thread with you and what I put in the course modules, but to see these theories and these key concepts that are so, that have so many dynamics, that have so many complexities, that's, complicated and confusing, That's why it's necessary for the content um, to be viewed by all of you that's in the weekly modules, because that's the only way that I can bring it home to you, is to show you real live examples. And this is from a historical standpoint. You all and we all have privy to what's going on in the media, what we see that's been playing out for over the last several months, recently back to back, along with us dealing with COVID 19 and this pandemic, and then the epidemic 1619. Yes, I do label that for various reasons. Some of you may get it, some of you may not. If you don't get it, I really hope you pose that question to me. And if you don't want to pose that question to me, reference 1619, and I'm quite sure you'll come up with, oh, I get it now. So on that note, I am going to end here. I know it's a lot of coursework. I pack these theories in and I front load them at the beginning because, I really want to concentrate on so many social movements and then backtrack, to some that we've already covered, that there are other aspects to, or there's more information. So I thank you for your discussions. I do respond to you when I grade based off of, a lot of times I don't, have very many responses. I just look at the work that you've put into your responses in the discussion board, and, I smile, and I am very pleased with the responses. And then the things that I need for you to pay attention to, I make my comments in the discussion board, grading on an individual standpoint. So I kind of hope that you get how this class runs. I'm known to throw in some current events that are really taking the forefront of a lot of what we are all experiencing, as well as what we're all seeing, what we're all bearing witness to. So yes, it is all relevant, and this is not just based off of theories. This is affecting all of our lives, and how and what role and responsibility you are going to play in advancing social justice. So I thank you all. I want you all to have a good week. Pace yourselves. I know that my class is not the only class that you have, so that's why I stress time management, because we're all doing so much in the conditions, and that we don't have any control over, but again, I'm human, and at the same time there's an expectation that you have of me that I must meet as well. So on that note, have a great week, and I will see you online. Take care. Peace.